Hello, everyone, and welcome to another edition of the Dentzel Domain on Red State Talk Radio. I am your host, Ed Dentzel, joining you on this day, June 1st. To me, officially the first day of summer. I don't know if I'm a big fan of saying that Memorial Day or Memorial Day weekend is the first day of summer. Maybe because I'm originally from Pennsylvania and I still think of summer in Pennsylvania terms, even after living in Las Vegas for all those years. Of course, you live here in Florida, it's like summer all year round, I guess. But June 1st is when I officially designate that it's summer. June, July, August. You get to September 1st, that's when fall happens. Can't we just keep this simple and just keep the summer months or the seasons to 3 months each? You have 4 seasons. You have 12 months. It's just divided up by 4. 3 months for every season. Let's just keep it nice and simple no matter where you live. How about that? Nice and simple. Yesterday, I was doing some work here at home, and there was a knock on my door. And if you don't know, my door opens right up onto the street. I live in an apartment, but it's in a very small apartment building, and my door, front door, is probably 40 feet from 140th Street here in Madeira Beach, Florida. There's a woman going up and down the street with these petitions, and Madeira Beach, how do I put this? It's a little bit different than the other beach communities, what they call the Gulf beaches of Tampa, which are to the west of Tampa, and that would include St. Pete Beach, Treasure Island, Madeira Beach, and then as you go north Redington Beach, Redington Shores, Bel Air Beach, the whole way up there. It is very much like a little town compared to the rest of them. There aren't many fancy houses or anything, whereas you go a mile north of me, and there are what you would typically think to be fancy houses right on the beach. You don't find anything like that in Madeira Beach. You have these little tiny hotels that look like they were built in the 1960s. And there are some newer buildings, but it's you drive through Madeira Beach, you definitely get the feeling that it's a little different than the rest of the beach communities. May I say, like I said, I think the rest of the communities are a little, how do I put this, a little higher class than Madeira Beach. Even though Madeira Beach sounds like a pretty exotic place, it's not really. So there are people here that want to keep it that way. And there's a petition going around. This woman, a lot of people, because there's a lot of development that people want to do out here, because really for the prices of the land and the location, you could say that the locations and the value of the land is being underused. You could say that. I have nothing against average people being able to live near the beach or on the beach and have docks into a bay in their backyard. That's all excellent. However, on the other hand, there's a lot of money to be made out here by everybody, and these people would have their property values go up if business was allowed to expand here in Madeira Beach. And I really, though, honestly, I don't keep track of it that much. But she's coming by. She doesn't want, she was saying that the residents here in Madeira Beach don't want for Madeira Beach to be turned into Clearwater Beach. Or she even said, we don't want it to be turned into Miami Beach or South Beach. We want to keep our little same old Madeira Beach. And she wanted me to sign this position. Well, you know Ed Dentzel's position on anything? I don't sign anything. I don't sign anything. I was very friendly with her. But it's amazing how I can be so polarizing on the show, but when somebody comes up to me with something like that, I'm so diplomatic. You know what I said to her? I said, I prefer not to sign anything until I hear both sides. Of course, what I wanted to tell her was, you know what? I don't see anything wrong with Madeira Beach entertaining bigger complexes, fancier places, fancier condo buildings and things like. I see nothing wrong with it, but I didn't want to get into it with her. So she gave me this petition or this information on what they're trying to do. And so the people who've lived here in Madeira Beach are trying to keep it the way it is, while the rest of the communities out here bordering the Gulf of Mexico move into the 21st century. That's how I would typify it. I'm sure younger people, 40-something and younger, probably see it that way, but older people have been in Madeira Beach since the 1970s, and now they're in their 70s, 60s, 70s. They want to keep it nice and quiet. So I'll let you know what goes on with this. But it was just funny to me. Here's like a political issue here locally, and a woman wants to talk to me about it, and I play like Switzerland. So it was kind of funny. I had a good chuckle about it afterwards. But there's Madeira Beach in a nutshell for you. Let's get to the show. David French. I've mentioned him on this show before, mainly because of articles that he has written at National Review. I think he's a great writer. And in fact, for this article on my Twitter feed, I'll be linking to an interview he did at Ricochet.com a few weeks ago with Mona Sharon and Jay Nordlinger. Bill Kristol from the Weekly Standard this weekend had teased out that he, and I guess some other people put together, had found somebody that they think could run as a third-party candidate, as an independent party candidate for those Republicans who feel jilted, who feel disgusted that Donald Trump will probably be the nominee for the Republican Party. Bill Kristol teased this out. And now it's out here during the week that it's the very good possibility that it could be David French, who once again is this writer at National Review, and I'm sure he does some other things as well. And they cite that he's been a soldier, he's a good conservative, does good interviews. You can find many interviews with him on the internet. Excellent writer, and I can tell you that most of the time when I read his stuff, I like it. So I have no problem with the man and his positions. But on the other hand, this just shows you, I think, where we as conservatives have gone a bit wrong in our idea of what we need to fix this country and the kind of political leaders that we need. And it shouldn't be a surprise, and I was talking with a friend of mine about Bill Kristol, that it shouldn't be a surprise that this would be the person that a guy like Bill Kristol would pick. Not saying that Bill Kristol and David French have all the same ideas on every political issue under the sun. I'm not saying that, but have we gotten a little too, as far as ideal candidate, have we gotten a little too wonkish? I'm just asking. Because here's what I think I know about David French after doing this show, and it's been 2 years now that I've been on Red State Talk Radio. Here's what I think that I know about David French. Nobody knows who he is. Nobody. I think that even your average person who goes to National Review online every day like I do, but doesn't have to do a show like I do, but just goes there to see what they're saying, the person probably couldn't pick David French out of a lineup. Probably couldn't tell you what his last article was and what the topic was. And if they were to be asked, name the top 5 people that you think of when you think of National Review Online, David French's name wouldn't even appear in the top 5. I think it'd probably be Jonah Goldberg, Kevin Williamson, Charles C.W. Cook, Jim Garrity, and Lowry. Forgot his first name. That's funny. The actual editor of the magazine. That would be the top 5. David French's name probably wouldn't even... After that, maybe Andrew McCarthy and a couple others. But surely David French's name wouldn't even pop up, even though he writes there quite often. That's a problem to me. And I'm still thinking, I'm standing here, I'm still thinking about what Lowry's first name is. Rich Lowry, there it is. Rich. Not a name that would usually pop into my mind, I don't think. Rich Lowry. So that would be your top 5. Rich Lowry, Jim Garrity, Kevin Williamson, Jonah Goldberg, and Charles C.W. Cook. Probably. Once again, then on top of them, maybe Andrew McCarthy and a couple others. David French isn't even one of the best known people there, but somehow Bill Kristol can go out there and find this guy. Mainly just because David French, as I recognize him, has been one of the most vocal opponents of Donald Trump. But you know what? The rest of those guys have been too. But you never think about drafting any of them to run for president of the United States for various reasons. And I pretty much like all those top 5 guys that I mentioned. Not perfect people, but they seem capable. This seems to me, to draw an analogy, this would kind of be like picking Albert Einstein to run Apple. Now, he's a scientist, and he's as smart as any person who has ever walked the earth. Now, I know he's dead, but just saying he was still alive, and let's say he was 60 years old. Smartest, one of the smartest persons to ever exist. Is good, probably would be good with computers if he was still alive. But you wouldn't necessarily pick him to run Apple, would you? Why? Well, it takes more than just a couple smarts to run that company. It takes a little bit of personality. It takes a little bit of business sense, which I'm not sure that Albert Einstein had. Have to get along with people. Albert Einstein, seemingly a nice guy, but not a social animal from what I understand. And this is kind of the way I feel about David French. The problem is nobody knows who he is. You could say David French to 100 conservatives, and I would doubt 10 of them would know anything about him. And so when you start thinking about having this particular person who basically most people who should know him don't even know him, and I'm sure he's a fine guy. I'm sure he's made a lot of money writing, and that's awesome for him, but he's just not a household name. It's going to take a little while to get a campaign like that started, and not to mention that where are you going to get the money from? And this is kind of the reason that I think that my opinion since the beginning when I heard about all of this of trying to find somebody to run against Hillary and Donald Trump from a third-party position, from an independent, from a conservative position, seemed dubious to me. Or I was doubtful about it. There's nothing dubious about it. I'm just doubtful about it, of whether it can have any impact. How many ads is he going to be able to run? Is he going to be able to get on any of the ballots? When people going in to vote, are they going to look at this David French guy and say, who the heck is he? So, just shows you maybe maybe one of the other reasons that we haven't been as good as you think we would think we should be, is that, yes, we talk about Ronald Reagan, but we know right now it doesn't seem like there are any Ronald Reagans. But we have to think about what were the strengths of Ronald Reagan. What were his strengths? Not just picking out the big deals of the time, such as the Soviet Union and inflation and stagflation and the military. Those aren't as big an issue now. We don't have much inflation in the United States. It's bigger than anybody wants to talk about it, but it's surely not the 1970s. Our military is still strong, although I know there are a lot of military leaders would love us to go broke spending money on more military equipment and more bases and everything else, which I think is also wrong. we have to think about his core qualities. And one of them was, you know what? He was already known when he started to be picked. Hey, Mr. Reagan, why don't you think about running for governor of California? Now, I know that sounds a little bit like Donald Trump. I know. But Ronald Reagan was also a humble guy, a modest guy. Of course, Donald Trump, those kind of qualities he doesn't have. So you have to find a person who is well known, is right on the principles, but is modest and humble at the same time. You know what? That's a little tough to find. It's a little tough. And dare I say it, Ted Cruz, not sure he has all of those qualities. And the rest of these well-known conservatives who have been around for a while, I'm just not sure if they have that combination of qualities to be able to speak to people. Even though I'm a Ted Cruz supporter, and he would have been, I would have been perfectly fine with him getting the nomination. It'd be no different to go the opposite direction. Say, it would make a great president if he was still alive, being that we've read so much about him and heard so much about him and seen documentaries about him, and there's even rap songs out there about him. Frederick Hayek, man, he would have made a great president of the United States. Would he have? To run, to, kiss baby, shake hands, probably not. So you have to find this mixture of qualities. It's just not enough to be right on the issues like David French is. You have to find somebody who's decently well known if you're going to get something started like this quickly. Now, if it's a year ago, if it's a year and a half ago, and Bill Kristol or whoever else are looking for somebody and David French's name pops up, maybe. It's a little late for the obscure person now. But that Bill Kristol doesn't realize that, and whoever else is involved in this doesn't realize this. Once again, it just shows you how conservative leadership, maybe it's been off the rails longer than we thought. Maybe the only thing that has kept conservative moving is pure momentum. In that we were a train that was on the rails, we got off the tracks, but you know what? Just because the train is off the tracks doesn't mean it stops moving forward. It'll keep moving, as we know from train crashes. They can keep moving for quite a while before they stop, especially if one of these high-speed trains that goes 150, 200 miles an hour. They get off the tracks, they're going to keep rolling, and maybe that's where we are right now. We're off the rails, but we're continuing to move forward, and maybe that's the reason it feels so dang bumpy. Maybe, why is it that Ben Sass's name didn't come up? Maybe he doesn't want to do it. Why Mitt Romney's name pops up, and I told you last week or the year before, or the week before, if it's going to be Mitt Romney, just spare me. Just spare me all this. That they had to dig as deep to get into obscurity to find somebody like David French. Once again, I have nothing against the guy. Good guy, right on the principles, well-spoken, nice guy, military vet, all good things, but just a little too late for somebody like that. Now we know over the years we've tried the opposite. Republicans have tried the opposite of that. And for example, when Barack Obama was running for, let's think about this. Was he running for the Senate? It was something that was going on in Illinois. And remember, people tried to draft Mike Ditka to run in that state. Remember that? That's the opposite. Finding somebody who's well known, but has maybe conservative in some respects, but has not what you need to be a representative of the people. Let's just keep it nice. And then remember Alan Keyes. He got drafted to run in Illinois as well at one time when that Ryan guy had to drop, not Paul Ryan, another Ryan. Remember, he was married to the actress Jerry Ryan from 709 from Star Trek Voyager. And Alan Keyes got drafted. That's kind of the opposite of this David French choice. Those people were well-known, conservative, but I'm not sure quite had the character, because Alan Keyes has always seemed a little kooky to me. So David French is like the opposite. He's not kooky, solid conservative, good guy, solid on his character and everything, but nobody knows him. But it's tough trying to find a combo of an Alan Keyes and a David French. It's tough. Even if you did hear on June 1st, 2016, I don't know if this is going anywhere. One of the other main problems I think you have is that there are many never Trump people, never Trump, never Hillary people like me that are starting to believe that maybe we just, as I've stated with an analogy to an alcoholic, maybe we just need to hit bottom. That we just haven't sunk low enough for people to really wake up yet. Maybe we just need to sink lower. Like a submarine in the ocean. You hear all that creak, you get down to like 500 feet, and a submarine, you start hearing that creaking as the hull bends and compresses under the weight of the water, and you get down to 750 feet. Can regular submarines even go down to 1,000 feet? I don't know. I know there's the Bath Escape that can go down to way, way, way deep. Way, way deep. But we just haven't hit bottom yet, like a submarine going to the bottom of the ocean. Maybe we need to go deeper before we figure out, you know what? Maybe we should point this thing toward the surface. I'm just not sure if we're there yet. And I think that's why a lot of never Trump and never Hillary people have decided they're just going to sit this one out. You want to have it your way? Fine. You're going to get it your way. Kind of like parents. Their teenager insists on doing something, and the parents know this is going to be a fiasco, but they also know they can't talk the kid out of it, so they just say, okay, go ahead. Go ahead. We'll be here. You let us know how it goes, knowing that it's going to be a big failure. But then that kid is 15, 16, can learn a good life lesson. And maybe saving him from himself is not the proper course of action. Maybe we as conservatives, that's the way we need to think as well. It's not our job to save people from themselves. It's not our job to save these Republicans and conservatives who want to vote for Donald Trump from themselves. It's not our job. We're going to give it a shot. We're going to give all these statements about why they shouldn't vote for Donald Trump. But in our job description, that explanation's not there. It's not on our resume. It's not a requirement. And I think that's also why a third party, an independent party, an independent candidate who would otherwise be a Republican running probably is not going to work. Just some insight there. Let's move on to something else. Along those lines, and I have about 5.5 minutes before the break, I was reading this story about how all of these Republicans are choosing not to go to, are already deciding they're not going to go to the convention. And you'd hope it would be a better cross-section of Republicans. Unfortunately, when you start looking at this list, you see Mitt Romney, you see the Bushes, you see a lot of not the most conservative people within the party. In fact, I'm guessing that most well-known conservatives who are politicians, whether they're senators or representatives or governors, most of them, I think, are going to go to the convention. But it's these kind of middle-of-the-road people who've been classified as middle-of-the-road over the years. Once again, the Bushes, Mitt Romney, and others. I think Nikki Haley is not decided yet. But there are many. There are way more than you'd usually have in an election year. Usually, everybody wants to go to a convention because it's just one big party. But people are staying away. But you'd like it to be different than that. But I think this is also an indication of something else. That the Republican Party should be very aware of. Reince Priebus should be very wary of. And it is this. See, even though I'm not a part of the Republican Party anymore, I even knew while I was in the party that my brand of conservatism was not popular. Not that it was hated. I just knew that I was in a minority. And I was fine with that. I was fine with that. The truth is, your average Republican, I think, now that we kind of had this all exposed, is less conservative than I am, pretty much. And is much closer to a Mitt Romney. That's the reason he got so many votes in 2012, and I didn't vote for him in the nomination process. And it's the reason that John McCain won in 2008. And it's the reason that George W. Bush won twice in 2000, 2004. It's not because a bunch of conservatives pushed these guys to either winning the presidency or to the nomination. It's because your average Republican, you see, on conservativereview.com scale, their freedom scale or liberty scale, whatever they call that, I'd probably get 100%. Whereas your average Republican would not. Would not. Your average person within the party is probably down in the 60s and 70s. Whereas you should know your average congressman or senator is. If you average all the senators up, they'd probably average out to about a 65 or 70 on a conservative review scale. Same way with the congressmen, with the representatives in the House. If you average them all out, they'd be in the 60, somewhere in the 60s. You'd have a couple like David Bratt who would get 100%. In the Senate, you have Ted Cruz who'd get 96, 97%. But your average guy or woman in those bodies is in the 60s. Where would Mitt Romney be if he was a senator or representative? Probably in the 60s. Where would the Bushes be if they were in the Senate or the House? They'd be in the 60s. And a lot of these other people who are staying away from the convention because of Donald Trump, they're staying away. They'd be in the 60s too, according to conservativeview.com. Just a guess that I have. What that means is that I think there are a lot of people like them who also feel the same way about Donald Trump. See, now what the party, it's kind of been flipped. It's really weird. Is that at one point, I think Reince Priebus and the party leaders were afraid that conservatives were going to stay away from Donald Trump. And I think that's still somewhat true. But once again, I don't know how many of us there were in the first place, because I think hardcore conservatives were not a majority in the party anyway. So some of them staying away, us never Trump people, is not that huge of a deal. I mean, they wanted every vote they can get, but they're not going to get crazy about it. But if there are many people who more identify with a Mitt Romney and a George W. Bush or any of the Bushes, and I think all these years later, there are probably more of those people in the party than there were conservatives like me. If that average person out there starts seeing that Mitt Romney's staying away from the convention and the Bushes are staying away from the convention, then and because there are more people like that in the Republican Party, then that starts to be a problem. And it's the very reason that I've told you that this idea that Donald Trump's going to win in a landslide and he's going to beat Hillary Clinton easily is just not the case. It's just not the case. It's funny how things have switched around, but these kind of moderate Republicans who are staying away from the convention could also be an indicator that a lot of moderate Republicans are going to stay away in November as well. But you've been listening to the Dentzel Domain on Red State Talk Radio. Got to go to the break.
The voice of American conservatism. WRS Digital, Red State Talk Radio.
And we're back at the Dentzel Domain on Red State Talk Radio. I want to continue with this thinking for just a couple more minutes regarding these moderate Republicans who plan to stay away from the convention mainly because of Donald Trump. And I think this goes back to the first topic of this show, and that was Bill Kristol trying to find somebody to run as an independent candidate. Bill Kristol, I wouldn't necessarily call him a moderate. He's not. I guess the popular term for him is a neocon. Kind of a little bit of a big government conservative, if you will. But I would never call him a moderate. But it's funny to me that he, among all of the other possibilities out there, would be the one who's in the front to spearhead this independent campaign. You notice it's not Mark Levin or somebody that's further to the right who is known in the media, has a show, has a magazine, is interviewed all over the place. It's not some harder core conservative. It's Bill Kristol, who probably overall, at least the way they look at government, is probably closer to George W. Bush than he is to Mark Levin. And then this kind of dovetails with these stories that it could be in the end that it's not conservatives, hardcore conservatives like myself or Brad Thor or Glenn Beck or Mark Levin or any of these other never Trump people who undermine Donald Trump's president or possible presidency. It's the more moderate wing of the party because they're the ones who seem to want to stay away from the convention more. And then one of their own, kind of an inside the beltway conservative, Bill Kristol, is the one who is trying to undermine Trump's chance to become president. Of course, this falls right in line with all those Trump people who say that he's going to go in there and all these moderates and all these big government people, he's going to knock heads together. But that's not the way I see it either. That's not the way I see it either. I think what we're finding out is that Donald Trump is a liberal, and I think a lot of his support is liberal. I think he's getting a lot of attention from people who are even to the other side of the Bushes. So if we're playing tennis, I'm on one side of it. The Bushes and the Mitt Romneys are the net, and the people who are your hardcore Trump supporters are on the other side of the net. That's how I would typify it. Just thought of that off the top of my head. It's not conservatives who are pushing Donald Trump forward. It's just not. I know there are a few out there, like Laura Ingraham and Sean Hannity, if you can even call them conservatives anymore. But it's not the moderate wing either. It's somebody else. It's something else. It's another group. But the moderates make up a huge group of the overall Republican Party. And if Donald Trump turns them off, I mean, he's worried about wooing us conservatives because of who he might pick for the Supreme Court. He should be taking a deeper look at those people who don't want to show up for the convention. What a fiasco this is. Just once again, if you're a political scientist, it doesn't get any better than this. If you can't make money as a political scientist in these days and weeks and months of this presidency, of this presidential race in 2016, you might as well just go to another line of work. Let's move on to something else. I'm trying to cover a lot today. Marco Rubio. Can I just say something, for being that we're into politics and what's going on with David French and now these people who don't want to show up at the convention? If you saw, Marco Rubio came out a few days ago and apologized to Donald Trump for what he said about him during these debates. I can tell you that's a mistake. See, this is something. Can I even go as far as to say this? I think that Marco Rubio has just dynamited his entire political career. I happen to believe that. It's one thing to lose. It's one thing to get into a presidential race and not get the nomination and underperform, I guess you could say, is what he did. And how he stuck around, we'd say, too long just so he could run in his own state of Florida and get trounced here. But then after all that, staying in for all those weeks and doing the debates and saying everything he said about Donald Trump, and then turn around a month later, 2 months later, and apologize to Donald Trump. People are not going to forget that. And this seems to me to be some sort of short-term gain that I think will eventually turn into a long-term loss for him. And anybody who has behaved the same way, any of these other people who have dropped out and then gone on to say they apologize what they said about Donald Trump, or like Bobby Jindal, say he's not fit to be president and then turns around and say, yeah, we got to get behind him. Those people, they are undermining their future as being leaders in this country. I don't know whether you're in Florida or Louisiana. I guess Rand Paul did it too. And Rand Paul in Kentucky. I don't know how you can be a Republican voter, conservative voter in any of those states and never trust any of these people again. And say what you want about Jeb Bush, and you know I'm no Jeb Bush fan. And if Jeb Bush was about to get the nomination, instead of never Trump, I'd be never Bush. At least you can say, you know what? He hasn't gone back on his word. He still stands by everything he said about Donald Trump. I don't like some of Jeb Bush's politics. Too liberal on a couple things. I think that people overstate his record as governor of Florida. Anybody could have been a good governor of Florida if they were Republican at the time he was governor of Florida. Anybody. He got out before things got bad in this country. Lucky for him. But at least he hasn't gone back. Now, maybe it's because the disagreements he had with Donald Trump are a little more personal about what Donald Trump said about George W. Bush, and he knew about 9/11. He could have prevented it, and everything that went down there. I mean, that was... Yeah, that actually, you think about it now and you say, yeah, that actually did happen. Wow. Just wow. And now a bunch of Republicans are going to line up to vote for Donald Trump. A guy who actually said that in a debate. But at least you can say about Jeb Bush, he's not reversing course just to get back in the good graces of all these Trump supporters like the rest of these guys are. And I'm sure there's some women too. At least you can say that. So, Marco Rubio, getting back to him, as I told, once again, this friend of mine that I always mention, it's pretty obvious to me that when this is all over, that we're going to need a lot of new conservative leaders because their character has been shown. And I know right now, to bring up somebody else, Ted Cruz, he probably gets up every day wondering what he needs to do. Because he knows that Bobby Jindal has reversed course and got behind Donald Trump. And now Ted Cruz knows that Marco Rubio's done it, knows that Rand Paul has done it, knows that a lot of people who said that Donald Trump wasn't fit, they're now reversing course and supporting him. And Rand Paul has to be looking at all of this, or Ted Cruz has to be looking at all of this and saying, what am I going to do? I hope he doesn't give in, because if he gives in, he's totally undermining the rest of his political career. Because I can tell you that any person that he runs against from now to the end, the next person he has to run against, if he's going to run for senator from Texas again, is going to bring that up. Some never Trump person is going to run against him and play all those things that Ted Cruz said about Donald Trump, and then play the day that Ted Cruz came out and said, I support Donald Trump for president. Every one of these people who has done this can expect that. So, we're going to need new people. And it's the exact reason that if you notice, and see, this is something that should be kept in mind, coming out against Donald Trump, if you are a politician, and sticking with it is not a bad place to be right now. In fact, I have an accompanying article, and this is what makes Marco Rubio's words so weird, and Bobby Jindal's words so weird, and all these other people have done it. For example, let's talk about Paul Ryan in Wisconsin. I know he's despised by a lot of conservatives now. He's definitely despised, definitely not liked by all of those cultist Trump supporters. But he has not given an endorsement to Donald Trump. They have some disagreements. There have been some words between them. They had a meeting a couple weeks ago. Doesn't seem like anything came of it, despite what the Trump people have said about, well, Paul Ryan's going to come out and support me. Well, if you remember not long ago, maybe a month ago, 6 weeks ago, Sarah Palin was out there saying, we're going to go out and be in the Paul Ryan won't support Donald Trump. We're going to go into Wisconsin and we're going to primary him. I thought all of you might like an update on that. Paul Ryan is ahead in his district by 73%. So I ask you, not giving your support to Donald Trump, how lethal is it? Doesn't sound like not very lethal. Doesn't sound very lethal to me. How about we talk about Ben Sasse, a guy who, of any politician, has been at the head of this Never Trump movement. Is he hurting? I know that a lot of Nebraska Republicans have come out and not liked what he's done and harassed him in political ways in Nebraska since he's come out and said this. But does he have any risk of not getting reelected? I know it's probably a few years before he has to worry about reelection, but does he have to worry right now about not getting reelected in Nebraska? That's not the sense that I get. So once more, it seems strange to me that all of these Republicans who have otherwise been good governors, good senators, good congressmen would reverse course. Marco Rubio, Bobby Jindal, Rand Paul. It's hard to understand when there's all the proof in the world that if you just say nothing, you're probably going to be fine if you want to get reelected. Can Bobby Jindal even be reelected in Louisiana? I don't even know. I don't know where he is and if they're term limited. I have no idea there. I have no idea. Didn't look it up. But if he hopes to have a future career, I know what I'd be doing if I was going to run against him in Louisiana. I get those clips from those debates. I don't know if he was ever on the stage with Donald Trump. I don't think he ever was. But in those other debates, when he said about Donald Trump and what he said about him in speeches that he gave, I get clips of those, and then I'd contrast that with him then coming out and supporting Donald Trump. And I just say, how can you trust this guy? How can you trust him? And that's what I say about Marco Rubio. I ask you, how can you trust him? Now, he's only in his 40s, maybe 15 years down the road, 20 years down the road. Maybe people forget about this. Hopefully, we get through these years and we make, I don't want to say make America great again, but we get through this. We're able to get a lot of this stuff under control with a conservative president, conservative Congress somewhere down the road. But that would even make it worse, wouldn't it? 15 years down the road for Marco Rubio, that he gave in, went against his conservative principles to show support and say he was apologized for what he said about Donald Trump. This is just one huge, big mess. But it also shows something else, and that is that Donald Trump, and this has been shown in every poll since they started taking them, and then with these primaries, is that Donald Trump this is the other part of it. Donald Trump has no coattails whatsoever. None. This is what makes this all feel like a total farce to me. These people who think that he needs to go to Washington and roll heads. Meanwhile, these same people go in and vote for the same congressman in the nomination process and senator that they've always voted for. But they'll go and vote for Donald Trump because he wants to change things. But they'll vote for the same congressman over and over again. I don't get it. I don't get it. Granted, some of these, wherever it is, whether it's in Pennsylvania or Florida or any of these other states where these people could go in and had to vote in some sort of primary situation for a congressman. I don't even know how conservative or liberal their choices were, but it seems to me, sounds like the incumbent keeps winning. But allegedly, these people are angry about what's going on in the United States. And they want heads to roll. See, I got to tell you, it's so hard to wade through all of this stuff. Just when you think you have it all figured out, it goes in a different direction. Now, in Paul Ryan's case in Wisconsin, it's easy to see why he's winning by so much. Why? Because Donald Trump didn't do very well in that state. But even in states where Donald Trump did do well and kicked everybody else's butt, those voters still are voting for their same congressmen and senators. It's all such a joke. And this is also why I continue to say, it's going to continue, whatever direction you think the federal government is going, it's going to continue in that direction with Donald Trump as president. In fact, it's probably just going to speed up and get worse. I don't see how you could see it any other way. Really. So, I don't know. I don't know. There are so many lies and so many distortions out there. I mean, we could get into a situation where you have Donald Trump as president, but those same voters sent every single congressman and senator back to the Senate and the House on the Republican side. You could actually have that situation if you look at these primary polls. Maybe. This is not like Barack Obama. It's just, in a lot of ways, Donald Trump and Barack Obama are the same. But this is something different. And it all just feels like a reality show, as if the people who are taking part in this can't appreciate that this is actually real life. These things are actually happening. Let's move on to something else. I mentioned yesterday, these days go by so fast. There was yesterday or the day before. about Hillary Clinton. And there was this, it was yesterday, it was the USA Today article about how they say, well, she broke the rules. She didn't break the law. USA Today says she broke the rules. And how I said, even at the newamericana.com, which is the news site I'm going to instead of the Drudge Report, it seemed to be kind of excited about this USA Today article. But if you actually read it, I wouldn't necessarily say it's a whitewash. But as I told you yesterday, really what Democrats want is just her to come out with a better explanation. Now, if you doubted me on that, I have a news story for today. I got this from heatstreet.com, which I don't know if I've ever been to that website before in my life. But a poll done by Rasmussen, if you want to believe it, says that 71% of Democrats would still vote for Hillary for president and still want her to run for president even if she's indicted. 71%. Now, you should know something about this statistic. To get to 71% in a poll like this among Democrats, she would have to get a lot of Bernie supporters to say yes as well. There are a lot of Bernie supporters who are in that 71%. That's something you have to realize. And it's the same reason I've told you that those Bernie Sanders supporters, they're going to come around. They're going to come around. They're much more likely to come around than the people who are never Trump right now. Let's put it that way. So that's why I tell you that most Democrats are already hell-bent on voting for Hillary. The only thing they don't like is that this email story keeps popping up, and they want it to go away in an explanation. They don't care if it was wrong. They don't care what she did. They just want her to come up with a better explanation. Doesn't matter if national security secrets are leaked. It doesn't matter if it was hacked. Just explain, just talk better, Hillary. That's all they really want. 71% seem to not be fazed by an indictment at all. And you know why? They're motivated for the same reasons that all these people who are in favor of Trump. It's, well, we got to have Hillary. If it's not Hillary, it's Trump. And for all these, because, hey, Donald Trump has as many skeletons in his closet as Hillary does. There's this trial that's going on with Trump University right now, among many others. But people continue to support him because they are fearful of Hillary. And some of those Democrats are in the 71%. They don't mind her being indicted because they're afraid of Donald Trump. And it works back and forth. And then you wonder why this country is in such a mess. Now, if we're going to have a crook in the office, then it has to be our crook. That is not a way to make a country better. It's not a way. This is the exact reason I can't get on with the Trump people and Donald Trump, is that I think he lacks character. I think he is a con man. I think he is a crook. Can't have a person like that in this office. All I have is my vote and this microphone. That's all I got. Doesn't matter what the other person is. You cannot have a crook, con man, flim-flam man or woman in that office, period. And you cannot have anything to do with it. But because we compromise and we're so fearful of the other side, we let it happen. I don't want it to be my crook. I want no crook, and that's why I can't have anything to do with any of it. But I got to go. EdwardDentzel.com is where you can find all of my old Red State Talk Radio shows. You can also go to Podbean, YouTube, Podomatic, SoundCloud. Find me at Facebook and LinkedIn. You can email me at edwarddentzel@reagan.com. Follow me on Twitter, Dentzel Domain, all one word, no space in between. My other show, America's Missing Podcast. I'd love for you to check that out. Me and my co-host, Melissa Bridges. It's been a pleasure talking to you tonight. You've been listening to the Dentzel Domain on Red State Talk Radio.